Okay, Shabbat Shalom again. So for the past 16 months, I've been talking about what's happening in Israel. And I realized that once in a while, we have to look at the outside world. Because like one of my history teachers, Professor Fishman, taught me at JTS, we have this tendency to believe the world revolves around us, around the Jewish people. And the truth is that we revolve around the world. And when we study our own history and we listen to our own story, we forget. We forget that there's other peoples and there's other stories happening around us. So I want to start by sharing an insight into the building of the Mishkan, the building of the Tabernacle, which we again read this Shabbat. So now for 3 weeks in a row, have read about the details of building the Tabernacle. And one of the most incredible things is the amount of materials that people actually brought to the enterprise of building. I always say the same thing because it always amazes me that people just started with everything they had to build the tabernacle. Now, interestingly enough for us, the most remarkable thing about all of this is that last Torah portion, Aaron asks people, when he's about to bring up the golden calf forth, he asks people for their nose rings and their earrings, and they all bring them, and, it's a prescription for disaster, as we found out. But this week, they're meant to bring anything, asher yitbenu libo, right? Like, same language we hear in Parashat Terumah. Anything that their hearts move them to bring in terms of gold, silver, copper, precious stones, textiles. And of course, people always ask, where did they get all this from? They were slaves. And we forget that as we were leaving Egypt, God commands us to take the gold of the Egyptians. So in a way, in a very unusual way, the tabernacle is getting built with all of the materials that the Egyptians used to extract from the earth. The tabernacle is getting built with the price of our slavery, which is unbelievable, which makes it even more remarkable that we part with these material goods. But we have no problem, because we as the Bnei Israel understand that if we want to build a world where God can dwell amongst us, we have to build a world where we can give everything we have in order to bring about the vision of tzedek that God has for the world. So I tell you that we forget to look outside. And I'm just going to teach for a second something that's in the Shulchan Aruch about the building of synagogues. I knew nothing about building synagogues until I came to Temple Bet Shalom. All my life, I grew up in a synagogue that was built forever, right? When I came here, we were building this building, and I was here from day one. And the meetings with the architect, and we switched architects a couple of times, were remarkable. And I learned a lot. One of the things that I learned is that synagogues need to have windows. They cannot have mirrors, but they need to have windows. No mirrors, because we're not allowed to see the reflection of ourselves as we pray, because that's like praying to a human image. But windows, we need to have windows so we understand what's happening in the world around us, so that our prayers and our meditation and our religious experience does not become so self-involved that we forget what's happening outside. And one of the most remarkable features about the synagogue is those windows that we have on the dome. When we first built it, people wanted to put stained glass up there. And I actually said, you know what? I don't think we should. We have to be able to look at this outside. And also when somebody gets married here, we want to be able to have the light of the stars. So that's why we left those windows open. And on Yom Kippur, it's amazing, because you can actually tell if it's getting dark or not, right? And it takes the anxiety out of it. Which brings me back to the point. We know what's happening outside. Even at a time when you're so immersed in asking God for forgiveness, in asking others for forgiveness, that you're bound to forget anything else. So something happened to me this week that prompted me to speak about this. Exactly about 6 or 7 days ago, the New York Times broke a story in the United States that I had no idea about, and Al Brown actually brought up to my attention after Minyan one day. And I said to him, this is going to be fake news. He said, no, Rabbi, I saw it in a number of places. It cannot be fake news. And I said, Al, come on, it's fake news. So now I can tell you what's been happening south of the border the last week. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in the last 20, 25 years, over 100,000 people have gone missing in Mexico. It's something that nobody talks about, something that nobody likes to mention, because the government is complicit in it. Regardless of which government it is, they're complicit in it because they are in bed with the drug cartels. And the drug cartels are the responsible parties for disappearing this unbelievable number of people. So when you hear leaders in our country say that we have to take out the cartels, this is not a joke. This is a grave matter of national security, and let me explain you what I've been reading in the newspapers, and I hope I'm not the only one here that read the story. Because, by the way, when you turn on CNN and even Fox or whatever it is, there's no mention of the world outside. It is just like an echo chamber of the United States, with an occasional brush-up of Israel, but nothing else. You know, there's an actual coup happening in Turkey. There's hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. Nobody knows. It's insane. So, back to Mexico. In the state of Jalisco, outside of the city of Guadalajara, which is a very, very important city. By the way, it is the third largest city in Mexico. The second one is Monterrey. Third one is Guadalajara. There is a ranch where remains of thousands of people were discovered last week. Now, how were they discovered? They were discovered because you have these communities of searchers. That's what they're called in Spanish, which are formed of loved ones who have lost someone who has disappeared. And they went into this ranch because during the last government, the last administration, the government went into the ranch and seized everything the drug traffickers had there, but they failed to discover the remains of the people somehow. And they didn't only discover bones and thousands of bodies rotting in graves, but they discovered mounds of shoes, mounds of glasses, mountains of teeth. And when I saw these pictures, I was triggered. Because we always say to ourselves, never again. And yes, it happened in Mexico, where I happen to come from, right? But the images were so similar. They have crematoriums in that ranch. When Al told me that, I didn't believe him. So I went and I looked, and then I called my sister, right? And I said, why haven't you told me anything? She says, well, this is what we live with. We all know, but nobody talks about it. It is gut-wrenching. It is like it tears your heart out. I saw on Mexican TV a woman reading. They found hundreds of notebooks of people that were imprisoned there and then killed, who took notes of what was going on and left letters to their loved ones. And I saw on Mexican TV somebody reading a letter. And I felt like I was back to 1940. Yes, clearly not Jews, but yes, human beings. And then, of course, when we as Jews defend ourselves and kill 5 terrorists, the whole world turns on us, and everybody cares. Even if we kill 20,000 terrorists, when we defend ourselves, right? But when innocent people are killed in a Shoah-like manner, Nobody says anything. So, of course, I called one of our friends, Gene Greenberg, who wrote that book that we all know, that we give now to our B'nai Mitzvah, about the story of his parents in the show. And I said, Gene, I need you to calm me down. I'm having like horrible, horrible nightmares. I can't sleep. And Gene said to me, we always say to ourselves, how did the world not know about Auschwitz? How did the world not know about Treblinka? Even when they knew, they didn't know. This is what's happening. A couple of 100 miles, I mean not a couple, but thousands of miles, 1,000, 2,000 miles away from us. And, by the way, they find these remains, and there's no one to punish. Because the government is so corrupt and so weak that does not fight against these drug traffickers to rid the country of them. Look, I've always said, and you know me very well, that I have nothing against people that come here to make a living to support their families. But if we allow ourselves to let these cartel drug lords into our country, terrible things are going to happen here. We need to be very, very careful. I encourage you to read the articles. I encourage you to understand what's happening, because it's not so far away from us. The one thing that I gleaned from this Torah portion is that the enterprise of the Tabernacle was built with such contundency. It was such an incredible, incredible work, because it was not based on greed. It was entirely the opposite. When your life is based on greed, terrible things happen. When we, like the B'nai Israel, give of our best, even if we lose it all, that we never had, but we then had, and now we lose it, that's when we prosper. And that's our story. The story of our people has never been based on greed. Never. We begin the story by building and giving even what we don't have. What's happening south of the border is precisely le'efech, the opposite. It's a story based on greed. When anything and everything that matters is money, human life has no value. Human life has no value. Let us understand the lesson of the Torah. And let us look outside through those windows. Because even though we live our lives giving and sharing and trying to be a light unto the nations, there are those around us who try to steal the light at every turn. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach. Let us please rise. We're going to continue now on